Stand by for action. We are about to launch. Look at
There's no point getting out the map of the Isle of Wight. We're in Upminster. Oh, hello, hello. Well, here we are, bloke off-road between pubs. Remember, don't drink and drive. And as always on Bloke in a Pub, and one of the reasons for having the outside broadcast unit is we're always on the hunt for good economic news. While we've been looking at the map to Isle of Wight, what we're actually looking for is the bond yield curve, because we think there's some good news in there. What do I mean by bond and what do I mean by yield curve? Well, a bond is a loan to companies or governments. And basically, the longer you're going to tie your money up with a company or a government, the more interest they have to pay you, the higher the return or the yield has to be. A yield curve, basically, if you plot out how much you get from interest on a loan to a company or a government for the length of the loan, you get a curve, and it usually sort of, I'm doing it to camera, it usually kind of goes up like that, so you get a greater amount of interest, a greater yield, the longer the loan. Now, what's happened over the last year is the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve in the States have raised interest rates, and they're coming up around sort of the 4-5% mark at this point. And that means that if you had a loan that was running for 10 years, that you bought a few years ago, that was only paying 2%, it's not actually giving you a great return, and you might actually have to take a hit on the price of that if you were trying to sell it to someone. And what happens then is the yield curve goes the other way. You start losing money on these longer term bonds. However, what's happened in the last month or two is what we started to see is that the longer end of the yield curve, the bit where loans are maybe being sold for 10 years or so, has started to kink back up. It's called a yield curve inversion. And what does that actually mean? Well, it means that the bond market is expecting interest rates to drop at some point in the not too distant future, maybe going into next year or so. And if interest rates drop, it means that these longer term loans, the interest on them looks a little bit more attractive. So the good news that we think we found in the yield curve, not the Isle of Wight, is that it looks as if the bond market is expecting interest rates to start dropping, which means that the bond market also expects that inflation has peaked and is starting to come down, and that the reason that the Fed and the Bank of England raised interest rates in the first time, which is to curb inflation, bring that under control, markets believe that that's working. Now, is that a cast iron guarantee? No, it's not, but it is an indication that the economic news is becoming a little bit more positive, and that we may have turned a corner. Obviously, we'll have to see how that one pans out, and we'll keep you informed as we go along. But possibly some good news on the bond yield curve. And on that note, we will see you next time.